Welcome back to the Deep Dive. Our mission, as always, is to take some of the deepest, most complex research out there and, well, turn it into knowledge that actually sticks.
And today we are really at the intersection of deep learning and patient safety.
We're focusing on the heart, specifically a really critical safety challenge in cardiac care for patients outside the hospital.
Right, we're zeroing in on this safety gap. It affects patients who've successfully started on these very potent drugs class 3 antiarrhythmics.
Things like dofetilide or sotalol, for our listeners who might know the names.
Exactly. These are essential medications for managing very serious heart rhythm problems.
But they're also high risk. I mean, when you first start them, you're usually in the hospital for days, right? Because there's this known risk of what's called drug-induced QT prolongation.
Which is a change in the heart's electrical recovery period.
Yeah.
And it can lead to life-threatening arrhythmias very, very quickly.
That makes sense. So you're in the hospital in a controlled environment being watched like a hawk.
Continuously monitored. But here's the core of the problem we're diving into today. Once you're stable, you go home.
And that continuous, rigorous monitoring, it's just gone.
It vanishes, and it leaves this massive blind spot in a patient's care. So, our deep dive today is all about a system called 3D A.I.O QT, which is designed to fill that exact blind spot using AI.
So that's our mission for you today, to pull out the core insights from the study on this system. We want you to really get how a spatially aware deep learning model can sort of reconstruct the heart's full electrical picture from just a tiny, limited signal.
And in doing so, identify those high-risk events and, potentially save lives once the patient is back in their normal routine.
So the whole conversation really has to start with the hardware, doesn't it? The limitations of what we have now.
It does. When a patient needs that continuous out-of-hospital monitoring, they might get something like an insertable cardiac monitor, an ICM.
Which are incredible little devices for long-term surveillance. But they have a physical constraint.
A big one. They only provide a single lead configuration.
And that single lead, that's the technical hurdle we need to get over. Because for doctors to accurately measure the corrected QT interval, the QTC, which is the gold standard for tracking this drug risk, they need more.
They need detailed spatial information, the kind you only get from a standard 12-lead ECG in a clinic. A single lead signal just doesn't capture the whole picture.
I've heard an analogy for this. It's like if the heart's electrical activity is a full orchestra.
A 12-lead ECG lets you hear every single instrument. The violins, the brass, the percussion, everything.
But that single lead ICM?
It only lets you hear the flute. It's useful, for sure, but you don't get the full context of the symphony. And you need that full context to spot a coming crisis.
Okay, so that brings us right to the core hypothesis of the study. The researchers believe their system, 3D A.I.O QT, could sort of mathematically overcome this.
That it could reconstruct all that missing spatial information, that full 12-lead picture, from just that single lead vector from the ICM.
So the AI is essentially compensating for the physical limits of the hardware.
It's a brilliant conceptual leap. It really is.
Okay, let's unpack that. How does this system manage to, draw a full map of the electrical storm when it's only given that one tiny flute note? It can't just be guessing, right?
Oh, not even close. It relies on a pretty sophisticated machine learning architecture. The study calls it a multitask encoder-decoder system.
That sounds like a lot of jargon.
It does, but the function is actually quite clever and intuitive.
Okay, so help us visualize it.
Yeah.
Is the encoder part like a detective, piecing together tiny clues from the signal?
That's a perfect way to put it. The encoder takes that raw input, just a 10-second strip from the single lead, and it learns to distill these essential hidden features. It's finding the fingerprints in that one signal that imply what the rest of the orchestra is doing.
And then the decoder takes those fingerprints.
And it expands them. It does two things at the exact same time. Task one, it uses those features to mathematically reconstruct the full 12-lead ECG picture.
And task two.
Task two, and this is the key part, it simultaneously uses that new spatial awareness to directly predict the critical number, the QT-QTC value.
So it's not just making a picture. It's making the picture and then immediately telling you the most important thing in that picture.
Precisely. It generates the context and then extracts the answer the doctor needs.
And its ability to do that all comes down to its training. This wasn't built on hypothetical data, was it?
No, absolutely not. The foundation was thousands upon thousands of real 12-lead ECGs from a large health system.
And, crucially, I see here that every single one of those training ECGs had clinician-adjudicated measurements.
That's the ground truth. The AI didn't just learn abstract patterns, it learned the patterns that human experts had already validated as correct. That rigorous foundation is everything.
Which makes the validation process they use so important. I mean, we can't trust a system that only works in the lab where it was built.
That's the definition of generalizability, right? And they really put it through its paces. First up was the internal test, inside the health system where it was developed.
And how did it do?
The accuracy metrics were stellar.
Okay, give us the numbers, but let's translate them. I'm seeing an area under the curve, an AUC of 0.942. What does an AUC of nearly 0.95 actually tell you?
An AUC is just a measure of how good the model is at telling the difference between a sick-signal one with prolonged QTC and a healthy one. A perfect score is 1.0.
So 0.942 is pretty close to perfect.
It's incredibly good at flagging patients who are at risk.
Yeah.
And the margin of error, the mean absolute error, or MAE, was just 17.5 milliseconds.
Wow. Okay, so then they took it on the road, so to speak.
They did. For the second test, they went to a completely different medical center, different patients, different ECG hardware. Everything was different.
This is the real test of whether it was just, optimized for its home turf.
And the results held up beautifully. The external test gave an almost identical AUC of 0.943.
That's amazing. Now, the error, the MAE, was a little higher at 21.1 milliseconds.
It was, yeah.
Should we be concerned about that difference?
Yeah.
17.5 versus 21.1.
Yeah.
Does that create any clinical uncertainty?
That's a great question. And while the error is slightly larger, a difference of a few milliseconds doesn't usually change the big clinical decision, which is simply, is the QTC prolonged, yes or no? The high AUC confirms it gets that critical question right. It passed the generalizability test with flying colors.
What's fascinating to me, though, is how they proved it could work for continuous monitoring.
Yeah.
Because that's the whole point, right? Not just 10-second snapshots.
Correct. The third test looked at exactly that. They used a public data set from patients getting dofetilide so you could see the ECGs change over time as the drug level in their body changed.
And the SISTA's predictions tracked the actual real data very tightly.
Incredibly tightly. A strong correlation with an R value of 0.851, and it kept that low error rate of about 17.8 milliseconds. Its ability to just spot prolonged QTC was still robust, an AUC of 0.936.
And they also checked for something else, right? Spotting a significant rise in QTC.
Yes, a rise of 15% or more, which is a big warning sign. For that, it achieved an AUC of 0.816.
That's so important. It means it's not just good at seeing the disaster after it's happened. It's good at seeing the train speeding toward the cliff.
That's a great way to put it. But the final, and maybe the most crucial validation, was testing it on the actual hardware it's meant for, the insertable cardiac monitor.
Right. It's one thing to simulate a single lead signal. It's another thing entirely to use the raw, sometimes noisy signal from a tiny device actually embedded in a patient's chest.
It had to work with that real-world data. And it did. The study validated the QTC predictions using true ICM recordings that were taken at the same time as a full 12-lead ECG.
And the results.
Still strong. A correlation of RT 0.824, and it maintained that really low error rate, an MAE of 17.5 milliseconds. It proved its utility with the very device it's designed to support.
Okay, so the engine runs. It runs on different fuels, different hardware. We've established that. Now let's talk about the clinical significance. What does this actually mean for that patient walking around outside?
This is where the story becomes vital. The researchers moved beyond the technical tests and looked at a huge real-world group of outpatients. We're talking 1,676 patients, all taking dofetilide or sotalol in their day-to-day lives.
And they asked a simple question. How often does this dangerous thing we're trying to detect actually happen out there in the wild?
And this is where it gets really interesting. It's not a rare event.
No.
A significant 16.5% of this outpatient group, almost 1 in 6, experienced what clinicians would define as high-risk QTC prolongation while they were just living their lives.
1 in 6. That's a lot. 1 in 6 people on these life-saving drugs are hitting a high-risk electrical threshold at home, and they probably have no idea.
And that prolongation wasn't just some number on a screen. It had direct, serious consequences.
They compared the rates of serious ventricular arrhythmias between the group that had the prolongation and the group that didn't.
And the difference is it's stark.
Yeah.
For patients with that detected prolongation, ventricular arrhythmia events occurred in 3.97% of them.
Almost 4%. And for the patients without.
Only 0.86%. It's more than a fourfold increase in the event rate.
Let's just pause on that. When you translate that into clinical risk, the adjusted odds ratio was 4.24. A greater than four-fold increase in your chance of having a serious, potentially fatal cardiac event if you have this outpatient prolongation.
It's staggering. It means this AI system isn't just detecting electrical data. It is detecting moments of extreme, life-threatening vulnerability.
It confirms that the thing the system is designed to find, that QTC prolongation, is highly predictive of serious downstream harm.
Which means the system is detecting clinically relevant changes. And the 3DR Econ QT model in that big cohort test detected these high-risk events with an overall AUC of 0.94. It found the patients who were most likely to get into trouble.
So if we synthesize all of this, what's the core finding?
The core finding is that by using this single-lead deep learning approach, they achieved what is essentially guideline-level measurement accuracy for QTC. The AI unlocks the potential of the existing hardware.
Right. It turns that limited signal, that flute note, into a robust clinical surveillance tool.
And that capability enables true, continuous QTC surveillance outside the hospital. And it identifies clinically meaningful prolongation that is tied to that fourfold increased risk of serious arrhythmias.
It gives doctors the data they need to intervene before the crisis hits.
It is the absolute difference between reactive medicine, treating the arrhythmia after it happens, and proactive medicine.
So what does this all mean? We started this deep dive with this problem, this limitation of single-lead monitors and the vulnerability of patients.
And we discovered this deep learning system, 3DR Econ QT, that can reconstruct that full 12-lead electrical picture from just a tiny 10-second signal.
We confirmed its incredible rigor. It works across different hardware, on real ICM data, and maintains these phenomenal accuracy scores with AUCs always around 0.94.
This is real-world utility, validated.
And the result is a technology that promises to dramatically enhance safety, moving us from these sporadic clinic checks to continuous, accurate, life-protecting surveillance. It bridges that safety gap.
And if we connect this to the bigger picture, you have to look beyond just this one drug class. This AI achieves guideline-level accuracy using what we used to think of as an insufficient signal.
A single lead from an implantable device.
Right. And that raises a really fundamental question about the future of cardiac care, even the economics of it.
Think about this for a second. Could a technology like this, could it eliminate the need for those restrictive, costly, multi-day inpatient hospital stays just for drug loading?
Could widespread, continuous surveillance like this completely redefine the safety profile of drugs that we currently have to use under such tight restrictions?
It shifts the entire burden of safety from the hospital bed to the algorithm.
And it could allow patients safer, more efficient management of their conditions in their own homes. That's certainly something for you to mull over.
We hope you enjoyed diving into this incredible intersection of AI and cardiac safety. Thank you for joining us for this deep dive.